The wind hits first. Not the kind of wind you feel walking to your car in winter. This is a wall. A living, moving wall of cold that presses through your clothing, through your skin, through your bones, and keeps going. Your face goes numb in under a minute. Your fingers stop working in 3, and you are standing in the middle of the last ice age 20,000 years ago, in what will eventually become Northern Europe. And you have no idea what you're doing. Here is the uncomfortable truth. You're almost certainly dead within 7 days. Not because you are weak, not because you are unintelligent, but because you're missing something your ancestors spent 100,000 years learning, a kind of knowledge so deep, so precise, and so complete that modern science has only just begun to reconstruct it. And what researchers have uncovered is astonishing. The last glacial maximum, the period when the ice sheets reached their furthest point, began around 26,000 years ago and lasted until roughly 19,000 years ago. Average temperatures in Europe were 10 to 15 degrees Celsius colder than today. Large parts of Britain, Scandinavia, and northern Russia were buried under ice sheets up to 3 kilometers thick. The animals were different. The landscape was different. And the humans who survived in those conditions were doing something that no single modern skill, no survival guide, no YouTube tutorial can fully replicate. They were not surviving despite the cold. They were living inside it. So let's actually think through your first week, not as a thought experiment, as a forensic reconstruction, built from the physical evidence those humans left behind. Day 1. You emerge into this world without a shelter. The first thing you need is fire. Not warmth, fire. Fire is the difference between surviving the night and dying from hypothermia within hours of sunset, when temperatures in Ice Age Europe could plunge to -20, -30 degrees Celsius on exposed ground, and starting fire in these conditions. Wet tinder, frozen fingers, relentless wind is not something you can fake. Archaeologist Dennis Sandgatz spent years studying Neanderthal and early modern human fire use at sites across southern France and Spain, including Pech de Lazay and Roque de Marsal. His findings, published in collaboration with Harold Diebel, suggest that consistent, reliable fire production was a skill so demanding it may have been a key evolutionary pressure, separating populations that survived cold snaps from those that didn't. You need dry birch bark, crumbled bracket fungus, a hand drill, or a struck flint. Your ancestors could do this in under 2 minutes. You, in all likelihood, cannot assume you somehow get a fire lit. Good. Now you need shelter. The shelters of Ice Age humans were not caves. Not mostly. Caves were used, certainly. The painted walls of the Chauvet cave in southern France, created roughly 36,000 years ago, prove humans moved deep inside cave systems, but most of the time, Ice Age people built portable structures. Archaeologists excavating Mezheretch in modern-day Ukraine uncovered the remains of 4 large shelters built almost entirely from mammoth bones, curved skulls, interlocked femurs, shoulder blades arranged like walls, covered with animal hides stitched together and weighted down. These structures, dated to around 15,000 years ago, could shelter a family group in temperatures far below freezing. They were not improvised. They were engineered. Your ancestors understood insulation, wind direction, and structural load. They chose their campsite based on the prevailing wind. They understood that the ground itself steals heat from a sleeping body faster than the air above it. So they layered furs and plant material underneath them before they lay down. You probably would not think of this in time. Day 2. You are cold. You are probably hungry. And here is where the gap between you and your ancestors becomes almost impossible to bridge. Food in the Ice Age was not simply found. It was tracked, patiently, methodically, across kilometers of frozen tundra, through a landscape that looked nothing like a forest or a field. Woolly mammoths were present but were not a daily food source. They were a windfall, hunted cooperatively, and every part was used. The daily work was tracking herds of reindeer and wild horse, reading hoofprints in snow, knowing by the angle and depth of a print how long ago it was made and how fast the animal was moving. Anthropologist and hunter Louis Liebenberg spent decades with San Bushmen in the Kalahari, documenting a form of persistence hunting and tracking so sophisticated it requires the hunter to build a mental model of the animal's internal state, its fatigue level, its fear response, its direction of flight from physical traces alone. The same cognitive system applied to a frozen landscape. Your ancestors were doing this. You are not. Even if you found an animal, killing it requires a projectile technology that took tens of thousands of years to develop. Spear throwers, the atlatl, appear in the archaeological record across Europe around 18,000 years ago, capable of launching a hefted spear at speeds approaching 160 kilometers per hour. The spear points themselves, pressure flaked from flint, were engineered to specific widths and angles depending on the game being hunted. Experimental archaeologist Kathy Rosen has demonstrated that producing a functional flint point from raw stone takes a minimum of several hours for a trained napper, and years to master. You cannot nap flint. You almost certainly cannot throw an atlatl accurately. And you are now 4 days from starvation. Day 3. Your body is starting to work against you. Cold affects your brain first, not dramatically. Not like a movie where someone collapses. Subtly, your judgment narrows. You make worse decisions. You begin to feel tired in a dangerous way. A warm feeling drowsiness that is actually your body beginning to shut down peripheral functions to preserve core temperature. Hypothermia starts at a core body temperature of 35 degrees Celsius, some 1 degree below normal. At 32 degrees, rational thought becomes impaired. At 28 degrees, you lose consciousness. Your ancestors' clothing was engineered to prevent this. Experimental analysis of Upper Paleolithic needles, some of the oldest sewing needles in existence, found at sites like Kostyonki in Russia and dated to over 30,000 years ago, revealed cells that Ice Age humans were producing precisely tailored, layered, hooded garments from animal hides, not draped furs, sewn close, fitted to the body to trap an insulating layer of still air. Mittens, boots, hoods, the same core design principles that modern Arctic gear uses today. You're probably not wearing any of this. Day 4. If you have made it this far, you are likely sick. Water in a frozen landscape is not simply snow. Snow causes your body heat to melt and metabolize. Drinking untreated meltwater exposes you to pathogens from animal waste frozen into the ground. Your ancestors knew which sources were safe, which plants could be used medicinally, which animal organs were the most calorie-dense in winter when fat stores were critical. The liver and marrow of large game animals were prized precisely because they are fat-rich in a season when everything else is lean. Marrow bones appear in enormous quantities at Ice Age kill sites, split with precise percussion to extract every calorie from the interior. Your ancestors were not just hunters, they were nutritionists, in the most practical sense of the word. Day 5. You are beginning to understand something. What kept these people alive was not any single skill. It was the density of knowledge and the fact that this knowledge was social. No one person survived the Ice Age alone. Bands of roughly 20 to 50 individuals moved through the landscape together. sharing information, sharing fire, sharing food, pooling the knowledge that no individual brain could hold alone. Researcher Polly Wiesner, studying the Kalahari San people, documented how evening campfire conversations, the speech HXRO system, functioned as a network of long-range information and resource exchange. She found that roughly 80% of nighttime conversation was social, relational, narrative, not instrumental, not purely survival, story, memory, history, the accumulated knowledge of generations, transmitted through language around the fire, was itself a survival technology. Day 6. You are at the edge. And this is the point. The Ice Age was not survived by individuals with exceptional physical toughness or genetic gifts. It was survived by communities with exceptional collective knowledge, the kind built over lifetimes and transmitted across generations, tested against every wind and every winter until only the reliable knowledge remained. It was survived by people who knew their landscape the way you know your own house in the dark. Every slope, every frozen stream, every stand of birch where tinder could be found dry under the bark, every valley that broke the wind. You walk out of that landscape not because you failed, but because you were never trained. The gap is not one of intelligence. It is one of inheritance. Your ancestors had 100,000 years of error correction, refinement, and accumulated memory behind them. And it was enough, barely, sometimes, but enough. Day 7. The wind hits again. You wake up. If you are still waking up and you feel it in a completely different way, because now you understand something you did not understand before you stepped into this world. The cold is not the enemy. Your ignorance of it is, and for 300,000 years, your ancestors turned that ignorance into knowledge, one generation at a time, until the cold became something they did not survive despite, something they survived inside.